Good morning, everyone. Hey, it's 10 o'clock, a little slightly after 10, and welcome to our second public meeting on the Career Tech Education Funding Distribution Order. So I'm Lisa Silverman, and I'm the Executive Officer for the Office of Public School Construction. And next to me is Tracy Sharp, and she will be leading the discussion today. But I would like to first thank Long Beach Unified for hosting this event here, and they put out a generous offer a few weeks ago, and I thank them for hosting us today. So Brooke, Murray, and Alan Rising for taking us up on this offer, and thank you for extending that offer and the many folks here that helped facilitate that today. So thank you again, and we would like to welcome all the folks that are here in the audience and those who aren't able to be here today. Thank you for joining our webcast. So we're looking forward to have a very robust conversation and getting some input from you folks. And Tracy will go over some deadlines that if you can't join us today, if you could submit your comments to us. I believe we have a time certain, and she'll go over those details. So again, our goal is to put this funding out as soon as possible. So we have $250 million. Who wants money? Yay, I want to give it out, so let's get this going. So here we go, Tracy.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and good morning from beautiful Long Beach here. So once again, my name is Tracy Sharp. I've been a supervisor with the Office of Public School Construction for a number of years and have enjoyed working with applicants of the Career Technical Education Facilities Program since 2006, when this great program was first established by Proposition 1D and then reinfused with funds with the passage of Proposition 51. So as Lisa mentioned, this is our second public stakeholder meeting regarding one aspect of the Career Technical Education Facilities Program, and that's the funding order portion of it. We, as you know, after Prop 51 passed, we've held two funding cycles, and that was funding cycles 4 and 5. Previously, through Prop 1D, we were able to fund funding cycles 1, 2, and 3. And as cycles 4 and 5 progressed, we got, each of those cycles had $125 million allocated to them from the total $500 million that was provided by Proposition 51. And through those, and during those cycles and afterward, stakeholders, districts, and others gave us some feedback on the results of that funding. And two main things came out of it. One was a general concern about the current methodology. In cycles 1 and 2, we followed a service region model where the funding was distributed statewide, and then within a particular region, the 11 service regions, of the projects were ordered by score. Each grant application gets a score from the Department of Education, and then is also designated with a locale, urban, suburban, or rural. We take those locales from the National Center for Education Statistics. And as we were going through cycles 4 and 5, some districts noted that while we have 3 funding locales, there is a 4th that is in the NCES database called Town. And currently, based on SMP regulations, the town numbers for 31, 32, and 33 are included in the suburban group. And there were some comments received that said, well, really, should we take a second look at that? Should town be not grouped in suburban? Maybe there should be a consideration for grouping it in the rural category based on the locations. So as a result of that feedback, following cycles 4 and 5, we have had, as Lisa mentioned, or we developed 2 stakeholder meetings. The first one was held July 24th. Got some great comments from member or people who were able to attend that one. And now here we are again today. So in preparation for these two meetings, the first one, we have a meeting report that we posted on the website and is also provided here today. I'll be speaking to those handouts. The first one had from July 24th, had a full history of the implementation committee meetings that happened in 2006, as well as the state allocation board item that approved our regulations. And so those are part of the July 24th meeting report and were referenced in the meeting agenda for today. So you have those as backup to refer to. So in looking at this issue and in preparation for these meetings, we decided basically to look at the actual funding that came from, as a data set, the applications that came in cycle 5. And based on the comments received about the service region model and the potential movement of town locale codes to the route from suburban to rural, we developed some scenarios. Examples of, well, what if things moved or what if we changed it? We created what we called scenarios. So in your meeting handouts for today, I'll be focusing on attachments I, J, and number 1. The attachments I and J come from the July 24th meeting report, and attachment 1 is a variation of what was presented at the July 24th meeting. And as a result of stakeholder comments, we had one more scenario that evolved from it. So what are these scenarios? As I mentioned, we took the data from cycle 5, actual applications received, and said, okay, what was the distribution? Because that was one of the concerns that was mentioned, is the basically equity in the distribution of funding. What was noticed is that while that lower scoring applications in the rural group, more or almost all of them got funded, versus higher scoring applications in the suburban group did not get funded based on the current model, which says, take all of the applications, look at their scores received from their grant application review with the Department of Education, and fund in order of representing each locale, the highest scoring application from each locale, and doing sort of a round robin. And as you go through those, because of the sheer numbers of less rural applications and a fair number from the suburban group and a fair number from the urban group, what resulted, you can see if I bring your attention to attachment J, there's a series of tables there, is that of the projects funded, we had an even distribution based on the current funding model of projects funded, but the total projects submitted is much higher. So we had 91 in the urban category, 106 in the suburban category, and 23 submitted in the rural category. And you can see the percentage there of projects funded is, as I mentioned, predominantly the rural category was more of them, or almost all of them, were funded versus the other. So with those stakeholder comments in mind, we created these various scenarios. And the data represented in the tables on attachment 5 represents how, if we made certain changes to the funding order, how would that play out? So in the first scenario, we just said, okay, based on the suggestion, let's move all of those projects that would have been in the town grouping to suburban. How would the funding fall out? And that resulted in moving 28 applications from the suburban category to the rural category. And then you can see in the how many projects would be funded. It changes the distribution of funding for the rural category and the others a bit. And then we move on to scenario 2. It takes into consideration, well, what if we went back to the original style and we considered the service region model. The original service region model said, take the total funding available in a cycle, prorate it by the high school enrollment for that region, and there's 11 service regions, and then use the funding model within each to allocate the funds. So that was scenario 2, incorporating service regions into the current funding order. And you can see the layout or how the distribution of funding occurs there on attachment J under scenario 2. Another way of distributing the funding is in scenario 3A. If we just went straight score, the statute requires that projects be reviewed by the Department of Education. They get a score. If you have a minimum score of 105, you can submit a funding application to OPSC. And if it was just based on highest score, locales at that point would not be taken into consideration, but this table represents what that model would result in, how the layout or how those funds would be distributed. And we see in that one, the suburban category ends up with more projects funded, and then urban, and then rural. So taking that scenario 3A of just looking at score and adjusting it just a little bit for purposes of just looking at how would the distribution be if we moved town to suburban, or town from suburban to rural, what would the funding distribution look like? In scenario 3B, we haven't changed it. We're still working off of the highest score. But if those project definitions or the locale definitions changed, how would the distribution be as far as types of projects and their locale? And so scenario 3B represents that distribution. Scenario 4 then takes another turn and adds back in the service region model. So we have the service region model applied to the urban suburban locale and scoring, but now town has moved into the rural area locale for this one. And you can see the change in the distribution. So we presented these scenarios on July 24th in Sacramento and got some comments on them. And one of the comments that came out afterward is a scenario that we had not considered beforehand or put into our options. So that's where, if you look at attachment 1, you see a variation in the scenarios where we call it 1B. It moves town from the suburban locale to the rural locale. And as a further change, it looks at it and says, let's consider taking the funding, and this are for $125 million, and prorate it based on the number of applications that come in for each locale, and then go through the funding order process. This came from stakeholders, this suggestion. So you see the funding there, the $125 million, is prorated by the number of applications in each group. And it provides once again, the distribution of projects funded is represented there in scenario 1B on attachment 1. For purposes of demonstrating the distribution regionally, because one of the things that in the original planning for in cycles 1 and 2 is how do we spread the funding that's available statewide. That's where the 11 service regions came from. You'll see on attachment K, how we've taken each one of the funding models and said, if we apply this funding model or scenario, as it were, where do the funds end up at that point on a regional basis if we're based on those scenarios? So attachment K is informational in that it demonstrates the regional distribution of funding with each of those variables applied to the scenarios. So I know there's a lot of data there to absorb and a bunch of attachments, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at that maybe before the meeting, or if you didn't, you're kind of absorbing it now. We also included in today's meeting report a summary of the comments that we received from the July 24th meeting. And that's in the August 14th meeting report. Our goal is to take those comments as well as what we received today, kind of summarize those, and moving forward, take them to the board. The board's heard some comments at our past meetings about this issue. It did, in June, designate that next 6th cycle to utilize all the remaining, or allocate all the remaining $250 million. That the dates for that will be announced hopefully sometime soon. We're working on that. But with those factors in mind, I would like to open it up to questions and public comment at this time. So in giving your public comment here, what I would ask is, as you come up, give your name it'll help us keep track of where our comments are coming from, and follow up as needed. And we'd really like to hear your thoughts on any of these scenarios that we've presented, or if you have a new idea on something that hasn't been considered here. These are certainly, the options are truly unlimited. We've taken some of the some examples here based on the Cycle 5 data as our kind of jumping off point. And so we look forward to your thoughts on where we are right now. We have a microphone right here at the base of the stage. And so at this time, feel free to come up. And even if you just have a question or need a clarification on something we've presented or in our packet here, where questions are welcome as well.
Good morning. My name is Don Isbell. I'm the Director of Career Technical Education for Santa Ana Unified School District in Orange County. We're currently about the second largest school district in Orange County, servicing approximately 50,000 students. Capistrano right around 51,000 students as well, to give you an idea for the two largest districts in the county. I think I could speak on behalf of both of us, so we'd also like to be moved to rural. We may have challenges in being able to do that. But I think that's actually something that it does lead to, in that in urban districts, addressing the Southern California region, whether it's LA, Long Beach, our many different communities that we've got here locally, that we definitely, as far as the way the numbers have been playing out, seen a disparity in the way that our students are being serviced as far as 4 new CTE facilities. That due to the way the distribution works, it is wonderful, and it's providing additional resources towards our Central Valley and northern regions, which often get ignored, often within sequences where this has happened in the past as far as for funding for other types of activities. And I think the intent of the imbalance is knowing they didn't have necessarily the resources or the ability to be able to pull together an application that maybe would be as strong to a committee, that had been something that had early on, and what has been a reason for part of this, a way of addressing it. Since now virtually every rural project has been funded that had a score that qualified, I think we should be looking at a potential new option. And that would be of just removing that. I think we've given balance for our Central Valley, for our northern region, to be able to fund those many important projects that they do have. But the idea was that we are trying to build equity across the system. Maybe we need to be taking a look at that a little bit differently, and being a look at the scores, and now looking at the application based off their individual merit, as opposed to looking at individual regions. And I think that should give some better equity for some of the urban districts, which honestly have not had as large of a share due to the way the current funding cycle works. And I have my Jeremy Cogan is our Director of Facilities. Jeremy?
I'm not as tall as Don, so I'll pick up the mic. Good morning. I'm Jeremy Cogan, Director of Facilities Planning for Santa Ana Unified, and I'll echo some of what Don said. I can't help but think of the cartoon that maybe some of us have seen of the 3 children trying to watch a baseball game. And the first pane of the cartoon is equality, because they're all standing on the same platform, but one child is taller, one child is medium-sized, one child is short, so they can't all see over the fence to the baseball game. The second pane of the cartoon is equity. And equity, they're given different platforms to stand on so they can all see over the fence. And of course, the last pane is without barriers, because the fence is simply removed. And I thought it was so apropos, that cartoon, to this urban, rural, suburban, locale comment. I agree with my colleague and with some of my colleagues in other districts around the state that when it comes to funding these programs, if we look at the voters in California that approved Proposition 51, the voters weren't delineated by urban, rural, and suburban. If we look at the taxpayers that are paying for Proposition 51, we're not changing the amount of tax base based on urban, rural, and suburban. In fact, the suburban and urban communities are probably contributing more to that tax base in support of Proposition 51. I'm very much in support of any efforts you can take to expedite the process. And I think it was said earlier that you want to get these funds in the hands of school districts as fast as possible. One of the things that school districts are fighting a very uphill battle with right now is cost escalation. Projects are getting more costly at an increasing rate. We have a strong and vibrant economy, and as a result of that economy, construction costs are changing rapidly. Projects that might have been submitted in round 4 that were then resubmitted in round 5 probably cost 5 to 10% more to build now. Projects that'll be submitted in round 6 will be the same issue. So in a perfect world, we would take all of those applications from round 5 that received a passing score, and we wouldn't wait until the May or June SAB meeting to fund those. We'd fund them right now. And we'd get those on the street right now for design and construction, because ultimately it would save quite a bit of tax money statewide by pursuing those projects earlier. Obviously, from the standpoint of equity as opposed to equality, we'd like to see that areas where we're serving a large number of high school students, that those high school students have that opportunity. Scenarios 2 and scenarios 4 appeared to provide more of that, and I'm certainly open to hearing comments from others and learning more about the scenarios through the course of today's commentary before giving any final recommendation on that. But we believe that we'd really like to see the grant application score, which, by the way, and I think others had mentioned this too, considers high school enrollment, industry needs, and labor market trends. So that CDE process is already looking at that. We'd like to see those scores be set up in such a way, the OPSC process set up in such a way that recognizes those high-scoring applications. As my colleague Don mentioned earlier, if we were rural, every single one of our projects would have been funded, and so unfortunately that wasn't the case. But we're very much in support of the efforts you're doing. We appreciate very much you having this stakeholder meeting in Southern California today. That's a huge support to us, as many of us can't get up to Sacramento. And we appreciate all the efforts you're doing to try to fund these projects as rapidly as possible. Thank you.
Anyone else have thoughts on the subject, current scenarios, or other options?
Good morning. My name is Erin Sapinoso. I'm with the Los Angeles Unified School District. Thank you for this opportunity for comment. And regarding the funding order for Career Technical Education Facilities Program, Los Angeles Unified School District supports Scenario 1B as an alternative strategy for promoting equity in funding order. LUSD agrees with removing National Center for Education Statistics locale codes of 31, 32, and 33 from suburban area and reclassifying them to rural area. LUSD also agrees with determining the proportion of submitted applications based on locale, rural, urban, and suburban, for each current funding cycle, determining the corresponding maximum monetary allotment each locale can receive, given the grant authority for the cycle, and apportioning grants based on California Department of Education application scores within each locale up to the maximum amount. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. I would also like to add that, as Lisa mentioned earlier, as part of our meeting announcement on our webpage, we are, for those of you who couldn't be in Sacramento or were not able to attend today's meeting, or maybe you just need a little more time to gather your thoughts, if you would like to submit written comments, there is a dedicated CTE email address as part of the meeting notice that you can send a letter, send an email from your district representing your thoughts on it. We would like to have those, if possible, by this Friday to help to give us time to gather our thoughts and make a complete report prepared for the state allocation board's consideration. So if possible, we'd love to get your written comments by this Friday to that email address that's on there. Or if you find my email address on the website as part of our directory, or Ms. Silverman's, it will certainly get to us as well. So we appreciate those written comments very much as well for anybody who might be watching and for those who are in attendance. It looks like we have another speaker. Please join us.
Tom Pace, representing San Bernardino. It's casual Tuesday for us, or Wednesday, I'm not sure. I've been on vacation for a couple weeks. Just wanted to say that many in the Los Angeles area consider San Bernardino rural, so like my colleagues from Santa Ana, we'd love to be considered a rural community. We too represent 50,000 students. We are an urban area. I would say that the distribution has not landed in our favor. Of all of our applications, every one of them received a qualifying score, and had we been rural, would have been funded. we have only had one of our applications funded. The majority of our applications scored in the high 120s. I would say, looking at the previous funding cycles, many high schools received in the rural area. A single high school, I think, received more than 8 applications. I would look at limiting the amount of applications per high school so that you get an equal distribution amongst high schools within a district. I would say that the more that we can find, I don't think the intention is to build a brand new high school where each wing is a CTE component. I would say that it's looking for individualized areas that need specific investment. I think merit should stand on its own rather than locale. I agree with my colleagues from Los Angeles. Of the proposed options, I would say 1B favors urban, but we're open to other ideas as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other attendees you're welcome to come up, and as I said, I welcome questions as well. If there was something that in this that you would like clarification on, please feel free. And maybe what I'll add to something that came up as we were talking earlier, that was part of our item, our report to the State Allocation Board when we took the discussion forward in June regarding the next cycle. Something that was in there that we want to make sure is broadly known is that if you have a score letter from cycles 4 or 5 going into cycle 6 that you are content with, you believe it's a good score, and you can use that score letter moving forward to support your application in cycle 6. There is a caveat to that, though, is that that score letter represents the grant application that was submitted to CDE at the time and received that score. So we wouldn't accept changes to that application. It would have to be the CDE grant application that achieved that score would be there to support your funding application to OPSC. So it wouldn't allow for changes of scope or budget or industry sector or anything like that, but you can use it. And so moving forward, as I mentioned, we don't have solidified dates at the moment for cycle 6 of when you would have the opportunity to resubmit grant applications to Department of Education and then to OPSC, but those score letters are still valid when they come in with the same grant application. And we do understand that may or, it's a decision, it's a local decision to use that, because we have heard you mention from a number of you outside of the actual public comment that costs are escalating. So that is a point that is important if you're looking at your grant application to consider those costs. And if you're reapplying because you didn't get funded previously, changing up your budget is definitely something you'd want to take into consideration.
Hi again. I had questions about, I know that you had just said that there's no solidified deadlines for cycle 6. Do you have an estimation as to when this might be moving forward, given the stakeholder meetings, when you're presenting to SAB, and then when those deadlines might occur?
So the goal is actually to take a policy item to the board in a matter of weeks, and whether or not we have some recommendations as a result of your feedback, because your feedback is really important about the funding order. So that's really vital in how we proceed with the remaining 250. So again, depending on the feedback we receive by Friday, we're hoping to share some thoughts with the board on how we'd like to proceed if they want to change, if there's a desire to change the funding order. So that's one item we need to knock out that recommendation. And then if it does follow through with a regulation change, then that's something that we would proceed as well. So that would be the second component of that, if the board is fine with changing the funding order. And then what we really had goals is to announce at our August board meeting is the timelines, absolutely, with, and that is coupled with the Department of Education. So their application timeline is coupled with our funding timeline. We're actually hoping that they mirror the same timelines as last year. So that's really our goal, is the same mirrored process. So that's what we're shooting for. I can't commit to that at this point in time because, it's a multi-agency process and we're all friends. And we all want to eat cake at the same time. But yeah, our goal is to get those to mirror the same timelines. So really 250 is what we want to get out as quickly as possible and to streamline that process as quickly as possible as well. And again, our goal is to bring, if there are any changes to the board as rapidly as possible as well. So what the funding order is going to be, and that makes it a very clear process for you as well. So, and hopefully the scenarios were clear as far as how this all shakes up and how this potentially shakes up for the future. And if you folks didn't have an opportunity to file this last round, here it is, one and done. Your opportunity to file for this round is open now. So let's not drag. Let's dust those applications off. If you haven't did already, let's apply for the program, because we want to do whatever you can to invest in the future of our kids. So let's not sit around. Let's do it. So let's get the kids that educations they need, and let's have the facilities we want to build. So again, let's have a robust conversation. Let's bring this forward. So we're looking forward to have these applications pushed through and cross the finish line. But I'm not sure. Does anyone else want to comment or no? All righty. Yes. Okay. We'll give the gentleman a few more minutes. Yeah.
So my name is Dr. Edgar Lampkin, and I am superintendent of Williams Unified School District, located an hour north of Sacramento, so I am a lone wolf here. I have applied for the CTE FP funding over the last 2 rounds. In the first round, our funding qualification was missed by 1 point with a score of 124 and qualified. The qualification was 125. I appealed it and was denied. Even though there was a high number of suburban grants funded, because of the higher number and the competition with suburban areas, we did not get funded. For the second round, based on the data that I received from CDE and looked at the most recent postings of schools that were denied funding on this round, it is my belief that the categorization model that OPSC used was unfair to schools designated town, locale. Furthermore, I feel it is inequitable to depressed communities that further lack resources and bond power due to its low socioeconomic demographic, because that is not taken into account or seen as a criteria for selection. Any school designated as town was placed in the category of suburban, and because of this computer-driven, I believe it's a computer-driven designation by NCES, no humans really have looked at these designations or labels. I find it kind of ludicrous that Oxnard, Elk Grove, Kern Union, San Lorenzo Valley, and other schools in high population areas were designated by NCES as rural, while Williams and Kelseyville were designated in the suburban category as town. Williams is truly rural with a population of about 5,300 and no more than 15,400 in our entire county. So we're very small. But according to the NCS model, we aren't considered rural. Of course, this large district and others in rural will be funded, and because we are in the suburban category, we are not funded. In reflection, I see a problem with the current methodology in addition to a problem of socioeconomic disparities not being considered. I feel it is not fair and puts smaller and high socioeconomically depressed school districts at a disadvantage by being placed in the suburban category. I truly hope that some consideration can be made to help address this situation. Your proposals are attempting to address more equitably the allocation of funding based on region or NCES codes. However, I do not see OPSC taking into consideration communities that are depressed socioeconomically and so small that state funding match is essential to accomplish CTE projects in such communities. My small, highly rural school district with 92% of our students being low socioeconomic was designated as town and placed in suburban in the last go-around. If it had been designated as rural, we would probably have been funded. As OPSC decides on the changes of funding order, please consider also taking into account small, depressed communities as a criteria. Our voice is small in the big picture of California. Nevertheless, I came here all the way from Williams, California, a small rural community, to speak on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Anybody else? All right. Well, if that's the end of our public comment here, last chance. Going once? Going twice? All right, everybody appears to be satisfied with the comments that they have given so far. So I think with that, we can close the meeting. Yeah, a little earlier than planned. And once again, thank you for your participation. And please feel free to put any additional comments in writing. We have this webcasted. You know, it's live stream. It will be saved on our website. We also will have a transcript of it, and so there's lots of documentation, I guess is what I'm saying, of everything that we heard, and then of course anything you choose to add via written communication after the fact. We very much appreciate your time in coming here today, and I know. Well, for myself personally, the school year kicks off for my family tomorrow, and I'm sure it's kicking off for many of you this week and in the coming couple of days. So hope you all have a great school year, and we look forward to the next steps in this conversation. Thank you for coming.